Welcome, everybody. Nice to have you here. And today I'd like to cover the basics because for a couple of reasons. Number one, because I think it's uh, quite often valuable to cover the basics. We can sometimes think we know it all and be pleasantly surprised to review the basics and discover some important things that we were maybe overlooking that can be very valuable for us in our lives. And for another reason, because I get a lot of questions from people where the answers are the same answers as just the basic stuff. So I wanted to cover the basic stuff so that it's really clear. And so what do I mean by the basic stuff? Well, first of all, let me set the context. What's the intention? The intention is to support you in achieving what it is that you truly want in life. And that's not just about being productive and writing the book and making $1 million and getting married and all that kind of thing. I mean, it's that too, but it's about actually really living in alignment with your values so that you can experience fulfillment. That's what really matters, so that you can really know that you're living on purpose, that you're really doing what you're here to do, that you are achieving what really matters most, and that at the end of this life, that you can really feel complete. So this is important for both material fulfillment and spiritual fulfillment. Sometimes people will think, they'll say, oh, I'm very spiritual. And so all of this nonsense about attainment and achievement and goals and desires and all that, that's just a big distraction. And I would propose to you that that's not a useful way to look at it, because if you have unfulfilled desires, whatever those desires might be, then you're not actually able to give yourself completely and fully to what you would consider to be the most important thing, whether you call that God or spirit or the divine or oneness or self or whatever you call it, whatever your view of the ultimate spiritual aspiration is. You can't give yourself completely to that if you still have any other unresolved issues or desires. And so oftentimes people overlook that and they think, well, I'll just deny all of those things. I'll just deny all of my sexual desires and all of my desires for money and my desires to get married and my desires to have children and my desires to eat good food and my desires to travel and my desires to write the book and all this kind of stuff. I'll just deny that. And it doesn't work. And many people are they get confused about this. They view those things as lower, and they view spiritual aims as higher, and they think lower is bad, higher is good, and therefore, if I just reject and deny the lower, and I just focus only on the higher, that's good. That's good. That's what I should be doing. But if you instead just consider the possibility that higher is not better and lower is not bad, instead it's all just about one entire reality. It's oneness. It's an entire totality that needs to be complete. Then it starts to maybe become easier to accept that even those very base desires, if they're not really satisfied, are holding you back from the fulfillment of total spiritual fulfillment, because it's one reality, it's one totality. So even if that it's sort of, in a way, it's like a bodhisattva kind of view. Okay, so that anyone who is unfulfilled is thereby in a sense is holding back the totality. So everybody needs to be ultimately fulfilled for the totality to experience that. So then when you put it in that perspective, then all of those things that sometimes you might have thought were bad and wrong, maybe are not so bad and wrong. And if you start to open up to that, you could start to experience, at the very least, maybe some more ease and relief and peace, instead of having that inner conflict going all the time where it's like, I want sex, but sex is bad. I should deny sex. Or I want the $1 million, but money is bad. I should deny the $1 million. you could just put that to rest, and you could start to view yourself as a unified being and stop being so uh, divisive and call off that war within yourself. So that in and of itself could be enormously valuable. So what I'd like to share with you today, as I said, are the basics. They're aimed at that, aimed at helping you to understand who you are and your creative powers so that you can actually live in alignment with your desires, fulfill those desires, and experience real fulfillment and know yourself as wholeness. So that's what I'd like to talk about. And so, in order to explore that, first of all, we want to start, I think, with understanding that you are a creative being. So sometimes people have this idea that, well, I am just awareness. I am the witness only, and that is the truth. And all of the rest of it, all of creation, all of manifestation, all movement, all of that is just illusion, and it's bad, and it's to be avoided, and I should not get mired in it, because if I allow myself to, then I will suffer. And so my goal in this life is really just to escape that. And I'll just affirm over and over, I am awareness, I am aware of awareness, I am awareness of awareness, I am the self, I am the self, I am the self, I am just awareness. And all this other stuff is just illusion, and I need to get rid of it. And if that's working well for you, then by all means continue with that. But if it's not, then I invite you to tell the truth about that, and maybe explore the possibility that possibly there was a misunderstanding. And so sometimes people, and I don't suppose this would apply to many of you, but to maybe some of you, you might have, like some of us, gotten caught up in that idea that there's this non-dual reality, and that non-dual reality is awareness. It is the witness, that is the only true non-dual view, and that's what's good, and anything else is bad. This kind of very divisive perspective. And maybe I laugh a little bit, because if you start to think about it just a little bit, you'll start to maybe realize that it doesn't even make any sense. So if I'm taking reality and I'm dividing it up, and then I'm saying one half of it is the non-dual reality, that's nonsense, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. How could half of something be not the non-dual reality? It's illogical. What would make much more sense is that the totality is the non-dual reality. And so, as I often present this, you could think about it as a coin. Not that I'm saying that life or reality is a coin, but it's like a coin, in as much as a coin, as far as I'm aware, all coins have two sides. If you've ever found a coin that has only one side, please inform me, but I don't know of any such coin. I think all coins have two sides. I believe that is the nature of a coin. And so if you had a coin, I don't have a coin with me, but if you had a coin, you could observe the coin, you could look at the coin, and you could turn it to one side, and then you could turn it to the other side, and it would sure seem as though there are two sides. It really appears that there are two sides. That seems to be the nature of Bitcoin. Smart ass. Yeah, I guess Bitcoin's the exception. I've never held a Bitcoin. I've purposefully avoided all things related to that. Um, uh, um, where was I going with this until I was distracted by that? So coins, physical coins have two sides. Hopefully you would agree with that. Things were easier back in the day before all this kind of digital nonsense, I suppose. Um, so, but we couldn't be meeting like this if it wasn't for the digital nonsense. So there's that. Um, but it looks as though there's two sides. So you can flip it over, you look at one side, flip it again, look at the other side. So it sure seems like there's two sides. However, it's illusory. So even though it sure does seem like there's two sides, you're like, look, everybody can see there's two sides. Who would disagree there's two sides? Everybody can look and see there's two sides. What kind of craziness to say there are no sides? Well, there are sides, but they're not. But the illusion is that they're the illusion is that there are two sides, when in fact there's just one coin. So if we focus on the sides, we get lost in that illusion that there are two sides, when in fact it's one coin. And the coin has, we could say, a quality of the appearance of two sides. But could you have two sides if there was not a coin? So is the coin made up of two sides? Or are the two sides qualities of a coin? There's a dependency there. The coin is primary. The two sides are qualities expressed of that primary reality. The primary reality is the coin, and that coin has an expression of these qualities of two sides. So similarly, we can get hung up. We can say, well, it seems like there's awareness, the uninvolved witness, and it seems like there's all of the activity, the illusion of life. Seems like these two things happening. Just like we can observe two sides of a coin. And then we can create whole philosophies based on that. People have done this. I mean, this is much of what religion and philosophy is based upon, is this notion where it's a focus on one side or the other. So there are those that claim this is a non-dual philosophy. It's all the witness, it's all awareness, it's all uninvolved, it's all that and only that. And there was never anything else. And then there are those that say that's nonsense. It's obvious. It's all just material reality. It's all action, activity. It's all movement. There's nothing other than that. Consciousness is merely just a byproduct of material reality. So these are kind of the two extremes. And so people can get caught up in that. And they say, take sides. Well, you materialists are wrong. I'm going to fight you. And the materialists say, well, you're idiots and we'll fight you. And they can get into a big tussle over this. But kind of missing something, which is that both of these are expressions of a single reality. And that single reality is not merely the sum of the two parts. The two apparent parts are expressions of that one reality. Just like you can't take two sides and glue them together and get a coin, because they don't exist independent. So if my invitation is just to observe your actual experience and notice whether or not what I'm saying is true. So have you ever been able to experience any kind of movement or activity or material reality independent of awareness, independent of consciousness? Probably not. And have you ever experienced or known awareness or consciousness as pure consciousness, independent of any kind of activity? And I will suggest that you have not. This is a mistake that oftentimes people will make. They'll say, "What I have in meditation." Who did that? Nobody did that. It's not possible. Because if you, what would be observing what? If there's anything observing something, then there's still these two, this sense of this duality, the sense of these two sides. But they always go together. They're never apart. You never have one without the other, because they don't exist independently. There's no such thing as just one and not the other. They always go together, because the reality is not the sum of the parts. The reality is primary, and those two apparent parts are expressions of it. So now, this life is equally spiritual. This material reality, this appearance, this movement, this activity is equally spiritual. It's all spiritual. There's nothing that's not spiritual. It's all an expression of oneness, all of it. There's nothing that's accepted from that. If you can find something, please let me know. So then the possibility is to start to explore how is this structured? So we have this dual nature where there seems to be a witness or a pure consciousness or an awareness, and then there seems to be that which is which we are aware of. Okay, so the observer and the observed. And there's a structure, there's a relationship, and then that continues to grow and blossom to become increasingly diverse. But fundamentally, it starts as we can't say anything about true oneness because true oneness is beyond anything that we could know about, think about, see, observe, comment on, do anything about. It's completely beyond that. You'll never say anything about it in truth. It's impossible. But what we can do is we can observe the structure of the rest of it. So there's a relationship between these aspects, the aspect of the observer and the observed. And through that, all of creation blossoms. So it's all taking place through this dynamic between the observer and the observed. And the fundamental power involved in this is attention. Attention is what actually causes something specific to express. So before attention is directed, then you have undifferentiated potential. And through the power of attention, that becomes directed and it becomes something specific. So it's undifferentiated, non-specific, pure potential. And then through the power of attention, it becomes something specific. And so this is why it's when people want to solve all their problems just by sitting in meditation, meditation is too vague of a term. If people want to solve all of their problems by just trying to rest as the self, it's a slow and difficult process because it's failing to recognize that there's a dynamic that's occurring that where there's a process by which the undifferentiated pure potential becomes something specific, becomes something manifest. And that's directed through attention. So when you actually start to utilize your attention consciously, you have the ability to start to consciously participate in this process, in this loop that's the process of creation. Now, again, it's possible and people are free to view this however they want. So if you wanted to choose to just denigrate creation and say creation is just a big mistake, it's just illusory, and it's all pain and suffering, and I'm just going to try and check out, you're free to do that, but then probably there's nothing here for you in this meeting because that's not what I'm talking about. Because I found that doesn't work very well for most people. Certainly didn't work very well for me. It can take a person only so far. It's useful to recognize that just trying to accomplish things in material reality in and of itself is not going to give complete fulfillment. That's useful. It's useful to realize that I am not dependent upon anything that happens here. So my fundamental existence does not depend upon any of the things happening in this world. That's useful to recognize because that gives you a very important perspective. So you're no longer caught up, at least not so caught up, in all of this false sense of urgency, like I have to fix all these problems. My existence depends upon these things. That's very useful, but that's about as far as that can take most people, because for most people, they still have all these unresolved desires and attachments, and just trying to rest as the self, as I said, is too slow of a process, and most people can't pull it off. Certainly not if you're still trying to be engaged in the world. That's why I make this distinction between being the renunciate path and the path of attainment or accomplishment. And it's useful to know who you are, because if you're a renunciate, then you should probably renounce the world clearly and definitively and stop trying to make money and stop trying to feed your family and just go to a monastery or a cave, because that would be the correct way to try and walk your path if you're truly a renunciate. But if you're not a renunciate, then trying to do that is not actually going to help you. It will actually impede your growth. So that's why I'm advocating for, if you can recognize that you are not a renunciate, and then good, there's a path for you, and that path involves, in many ways, it's faster, because then you can engage consciously in the process of creation, and you can fulfill your desires. So we'll resolve things much clearer and faster. But then you need to understand how creation is structured, what the process is. So, so as I said, there's a relationship happening between the dual aspects, and that relationship is governed by or mediated by attention. So attention is super important, and most people overlook this. So most people are trying just to rely on techniques. They've watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and they're like, okay, I got the techniques. I'll use the techniques. And they get some results with the techniques. Maybe they don't. But at some point, it stalls. Because if you're just depending on techniques, you don't have a deep enough understanding of the mechanisms, so you don't know how to troubleshoot. You're just stuck with techniques. Techniques are not a low enough level in order to give you real mastery. If you want real mastery, you have to actually understand at the fundamental level how things are working. So that's why I emphasize the importance of attention, because attention is that fundamental relationship between the dual aspects of reality. Okay. And it's your fundamental power. It's how you create. So the basic law, and again, I'm not telling you that you have to believe me. I'm just giving you the information. Then I invite you to check it out in your own experience. Just see if it's true or not. That law is that whatever you put your attention on, that's where your energy goes. So you get more of that. And the big mistake that people make, even when they have this fundamental understanding, this very basic understanding, is they still keep putting their attention on what they don't want. I've said this so many times, and I will keep saying it because it's probably the biggest, most important thing that where people make the mistake, myself included. It's so easy to make that mistake, but it's also tremendously painful and really slows down things. So if you took nothing else away from this talk today, hear this. Putting your attention, whatever you put your attention on, that's what you get more of. And if you put your attention on what you don't want, you will get more of what you don't want. And so how is it that people put their attention on what they don't want? Well, probably an enormous variety of ways, but one of the most fundamental ways that people do that is they just keep telling themselves what they don't want. I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. The mistake is thinking that just saying what you don't want somehow is going to give you what you do want. It won't. Saying what you don't want is like, think about this. So it's basically an infinite reality, infinite diversity. And you take away one thing. You say, I don't want this. Okay. So mathematically, what is infinity minus one? It's still infinity. Infinity minus one is still infinity. So you've done basically nothing by just simply saying, I don't want this one thing. You have not helped yourself at all to get clarity about what you do want. And worse than that, you're still putting your attention on what you don't want. So you've not made any progress toward what you do want, and you're still putting your attention on what you don't want. That's the big mistake, If you just say, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, all you're doing is reinforcing what you don't want and getting absolutely no clarity whatsoever in what you do want. And yet that's where most people stay stuck. And then sometimes people will hear this and then they'll say, okay, now I get it. And then they start dressing it up. They say, oh, I get it. It's not that I don't want the debt. It's that I want to pay off the debt. Well, same basic mistake, right? So if you want to pay off the debt, it seems like it's better than I don't want the debt, except that it's not. You're still just focused on the debt. I don't want the debt. Now dressed up as I want to pay off the debt. You're still focused on the debt. You have no actual clarity about what you want. You're still just focused on the debt. It seems like progress, but it's not. Because you actually have to get clarity about what you want if you want things to change. So instead of what you don't want, you have to think about what you actually do want. So I've suggested this question a number of times. I'll suggest it again today because it's really powerful. Ask yourself, what do I want instead? And imagine, so even with that, you can still get yourself into trouble because you could say, well, what do I want instead of the debt? I want to pay off the debt. I want to be debt free. You know, what do I want instead of this person abusing me? Well, I want them to stop abusing me. It seems like it's a step in the right direction. It's not though. It's just dressed up the same thing. You know, you've put the there's some expression for this that I can't think of, but it's not useful. So there's a let me put some conditions on this. So imagine for a moment, as let's call this a thought experiment, that what you don't want does not exist. So just imagine that it does not exist. And then ask yourself, in this kind of a weird thing to way to phrase this, now if it doesn't exist, but nonetheless, just until I come up with a better way of saying it, say, what do you want instead? Instead of what? I don't know, because there's nothing there. But just say, what do you want instead of the thing that's not there? Okay, so there was something there that you were saying that you didn't want. I don't want the debt. I don't want the pain. I don't want the this. I don't want the that. And then let's just imagine that's not there. Imagine the pain's not there, the debt's not there, the abuse is not there, the whatever that is. Imagine that's not there. Now that you can no longer reference that thing. What do you want instead? You'll probably draw a blank for a little while. What do you mean? Because all you've known is the thing you don't want. But let's just take that away. So you're forcing yourself to actually get clarity about what you do want. And so now when you start to get some clarity about what you do want, then what's going to happen is you're going to realize, well, usually it will be one of two things will happen. Okay, so either what you're going to want is a specific goal. Okay, so if you say, well, uh, if there's no debt, then what is it that I want instead? And you might say, well, then I want to travel the world. I don't know. You know, that could be your thing. Okay. So that would be something that would be an actual goal. You want to travel the world. It's not too specific. We need to dial that in a little bit more. But that could be the kind of thing that might come up. You're like, oh, I want to travel the world. Or I want to write my book. Whatever the thing is, you know, you've got something you want, it would be a goal. So it's something that you could attain that has some kind of external, seemingly objective expression. So that could be one possibility. Another possibility is it would be that there's some value that you want to fulfill. Okay, so you could say, well, what do I want instead? I just want to be happy. Okay, so that could happen. So these are kind of the two possibilities. One would be a goal. A goal would be something external, measurable, something that could be seen or observed or measured. And then another possibility would be a value. So a value would be something that's intangible, but you experience that subjectively. Like I want to be happy, I want to be joyful, I want to be peaceful. So these are kind of two categories. When you answer that question, what do I want instead? It's likely that it would be one of these two things. If you come up with something else, let me know. So then here's what I propose. I propose that, and this is where it gets tricky. Okay, so goals are often, if all you do is chase after goals, often it'll end up leaving you feeling kind of empty. Not always. If you get lucky, you might end up doing it just by chance in a good way that will leave you feeling really fulfilled. But if you don't do this consciously with enough information, then for many people, just chasing after goals will be ultimately unfulfilling. On the other hand, if you're trying to fulfill your values just by themselves, then oftentimes that's difficult because it's too vague. It's not clear. How will you do that? Right? I want to be happy. Sounds nice, but how will you be happy? How will you know when you're happy? What steps will you take to be happy? It's usually not clear. So here's how I propose doing this. I've found that uh, these two go together really well. Goals and values, when you combine them, work really well because ultimately what you want really is to fulfill your values. But you need a vehicle usually to fulfill your values. You need some kind of actionable process that you're going to take in order to achieve that. So if you just say, I want to be happy, sounds nice. Who here does not want to be happy? Is there anybody here who does not want to be happy? And is there anybody here who is completely as happy as you would like to be? Okay, so everybody wants to be happy and everybody wants to be happier than they are, which means that you have not figured out how to achieve that. And what I'm proposing is that values are typically quite difficult to fulfill directly on their own. Not impossible, but it's just more challenging than necessary. Whereas when you combine a goal and a value together, it's easier because the goal serves as the vehicle that allows you to fulfill the value. So what do I mean by that? And how would one go about doing that? So, well, I will say, okay, so that in the Manifesting Truth program, I do go into more detail on the exact processes, and I break that down into steps, and I support people through the process. So I think that's the best way that I know to guide people through that. So I'm giving you an overview here, and it's certainly enough information that you could do this on your own, but just have that understanding that this might take you some time to kind of process this and figure this out on your own. Okay. Um, the so typically for many people it comes easy for them just to have goals, and so I would say identify your goals and then prioritize them because you can only really attention can only go to one thing at a time. Multitasking is a big uh, disaster. If you try to multitask, you will be very unfulfilled because attention can only go to one thing at a time. And you lose a lot of energy every time you switch attention. So if you're focused on one thing and then you switch to another thing, you lose a lot of energy in that switching. So if you switch back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, then you lose most of your energy. Whereas if you can sustain your attention on one thing for a long enough time, you can give sufficient energy to it to completely satisfy that one thing. So there's an enormous power in sustaining attention on something And in order to help yourself out with that, I mean, there are many tips that I could give you, but the number one thing is just prioritize what you want, because you want to know what's the most important thing to you right now. You might have a dozen goals that you would like to achieve. You might have 100 goals you'd like to achieve, but they can't all be equally important to you right now. So get clear about what's the most important, and to the greatest extent possible, just focus on one until you've fulfilled it. You want to completely fulfill a goal before you move on to the next. Now, it's oftentimes difficult for people to do that because we say, well, I can't really just do one thing. Okay, fine. And let me just also insert into here that, of course, you're going to have many small goals that will be difficult for you to avoid. I mean, like you might have a goal of, well, I'm hungry and I don't have any food and I'm going to go get food. Okay, that's going to happen. Then you might have a goal of, if you're married and you have kids, like, okay, my spouse wants something, and it's disruptive in terms of our relationship and my well-being if I'm ignoring that. So I'm going to give some attention to that and address that. I mean, those things will happen. You still want to prioritize those things, but understand that to some degree you're going to have these little small things that will be there. But in terms of the bigger things, the bigger goals that you want to achieve in your life, try as much as possible to narrow that down to just one, two, or three at the most that you're going to prioritize now. Because if you go beyond that, it's going to take forever to accomplish them. So the more you can focus, the better. Because remember, every time you switch, you lose something. So the more you can stay focused on one thing, the better. So if you can identify your goals, then you want to find out what are the values that you want to fulfill through those goals. And I'm not going to give you a process for doing that. You can kind of just wing it, and that will be good enough for now. Because if I tried to give you a process, then people would, we'd be here the rest of this meeting and people would still be confused and asking questions, because that takes time to master that process. But you could get started now just by asking yourself, what are the values that you want to fulfill through that? Right. And those values might be things like I might want to be happy. Right. So like, now this matters because if you think about it, like I said, if for most people, they could just chase after fulfilling goals and not actually be fulfilled, right? You could tick off the things. You say, well, I made the $1 million. Like, why am I still dissatisfied? Well, because there are a lot of ways to make $1 million. And not all of those ways are actually going to work well for you. But if you don't have clarity about what values you want to fulfill through that goal, chances are you're going to try to do it in ways that don't really align with your values. Because because in this day and age, particularly, you think I want to make $1 million, and you Google how do I make $1 million, and it's like, well, FBA, right, and drop ship from AliExpress, and what all the do some digital marketing, whatever, all the ways that get into real estate, right? You're gonna be be a broker, right, a listing broker, all this kind of stuff, and you're like, that's how people make money, so that's how I'm gonna make money. I'm going to make $1 million. I'm going to be a listing broker, make $1 million. Well, interesting. If you're really lucky, then that might just by chance line up with your values, but it might not. And if it doesn't, then guess what? Even if you succeeded, which you probably wouldn't, but even if you did, you would not be happy. You would be very unhappy with that. So having clarity about what your values are that you want to fulfill through that goal will help you enormously. I hope you understand that I'm giving you real gold here. This is stuff that I don't know anybody else who will spell this out for you. And if you follow through on this, just with this information, like even if you just implemented like 5% of this, you would see significant improvements in your life. Okay. So find out what those values are. Now, if you say, well, I just want to be happy, that, you know, what do I want instead? Well, I just want to be happy. Okay, well, when you imagine yourself being happy, what do you see yourself doing? Because having, like, in what way are you going to be happy? Are you going to be happy? You're going to be, I mean, you can say, well, I'm going to be happy always and always. Okay, interesting idea. But you're going to have a really difficult time actually taking steps to progress in that direction. If it's just this thing, I'm just going to be happy always. If you're not presently perceiving yourself as happy now, or not as happy as you'd like to be, how will you get from where you are now to where you want to be if you don't even know where you want to be is? All you know is I'm just going to be happy always. You're not going to be happy always. You're going to be happy in certain contexts. Now you might say, well, I'll be happy in many contexts. Great, but let's just get clear about what those contexts are. So so are you going to be happy in your career? Are you going to be happy in your marriage? Are you going to be happy with your friends? Are you going to be happy writing a book? What are you going to be happy in? Okay. Get clear about that and then find out which of those things is the most important to you. You might say, but they're all important. Okay, interesting. Sure. But remember, you can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you just say, I want to be happy in all of these contexts, it will just stay that way. You'll just continue to want to be happy in all those contexts. But if you actually prioritize, then you can actually get happier, right? So if you say, I want to be happy in my writing a book, and I want to be happy in my marriage, and I want to be happy when I'm doing sit-ups, and I want to be happy, then you're probably not going to get happier. But if you say, okay, of all these things, you know, my marriage, that's where I really want to be happy. That's when I close my eyes and I imagine being happy, that's the first thing that comes to mind. And boy, that really lights me on fire. I'm thought, when I think about being happy in my marriage, I am just so happy. Okay, great. Then focus there. So now you start to have kind of a goal, right? It's like, oh, I want to be happier in my marriage. It's more of a goal, but then start to actually turn that into something measurable. So how will you know when you're happier in your marriage? What are the specific measurements that will allow you to know that? Because we're talking about a value. You want to be happy, and there's a context now, marriage. But what are the specific measurements that will allow you to know that you're achieving that? Now, again, remember that when we talk about a goal, it's just a vehicle. So it's not like if you say, well, I'll know that I'm happier in my marriage when uh, my spouse and I are doing the dishes together every night. I don't know, maybe that's your thing, right? So now, if you're just by achieving that goal of you and your spouse doing dishes together every night, does that guarantee you'll be happier? No, but it now gives you a vehicle so that you can begin to actually take steps to achieve the fulfillment of that value in that context. So this is really important. Hopefully that makes sense because if it's just a value by itself, it's very challenging to actually be able to take steps. So here's the thing is that when we want to manifest, when we want to experience, when we want to express, when we want to create, when we want to learn, all those are kind of synonyms, okay? Then that is an iterative process. So we have to take an action. We have to get feedback. We have to learn from that, and then we have to take another action. This is why we need a vehicle to fulfill our values. We think, because here's the thing, values, we often think of values as just being these sort of intangible things. Well, how do you know what your values are? I'll tell you the answer to that, just to keep things as brief as possible. Your values are generalizations that you've made about things that are important based on experiences that you've had. So you actually develop your values or you form your values based on experiences. Well, what are experiences? They're activities. They're things that happen. So you actually have to do something in order to get feedback so that you can learn something, so you can take more action, get more feedback, learn something, take more action, and through those repeated actions, which are the experiences, you then develop your values. That's how you know you want to be happy, because in the past you've had many experiences where you said, this was an experience where I was happy, and that's important. You can only know that because you had those experiences. If you just stayed forever resting as the self, you would have no experiences. Therefore, you would not know anything about you would not know anything about anything. So very, very blissful, right? So I'm not knocking it. It's just that most of us are not going to pull that off because that's not our path right now. And if we tell ourselves that that's the only way, then we stay stuck. Whereas what I'm proposing is just be honest that you have values. You want to live in alignment with those values. You want to learn important key things to satisfy certain desires that you have. And that will actually help you more than trying to deny things and just rest as a self when you're also trying to pay bills. So your values are generalizations about what you perceive as important based on experiences that you've had, which means, again, that comes out of this iterative process where you take action, you get feedback, you learn, you take more action. So you keep iterating in this way. It's cyclical. You take action, you get feedback, you learn, you take more action. So manifestation works like that. So when people think, oh, I'm just going to I'm not going to take any action, you're deceiving yourself. I'm not saying that seemingly magical things can't occur. Of course they can. But they appear to be magical only because you're not conscious of the iterative process that's occurring. There's still an iterative process. It's just that you're not conscious of it. But for all of those aspects of your experience that are conscious, then having awareness of the iterative nature is useful because that will allow you to actually start to consciously do this. So you want to have a goal so that the goal you can take steps toward. You can take actions, get feedback, learn, take more actions. Now, again, those actions might be conscious or unconscious. If they're unconscious, then the results will appear to be magical. But oftentimes they are conscious. And so being aware of this consciously will allow you to act in alignment with that so you can get enhanced results. And in any case, having a goal is useful because it will allow you to focus so that actions can occur, whether it's conscious or unconscious. That will allow the creative process to unfold. If there's, in the absence of goals, I would say you cannot achieve anything without a goal. It's just if you don't make the goal conscious, it's harder. If you don't, if you achieve anything, there was a goal, whether you were conscious of it or not. So making a goal explicit and conscious is useful, and it does not have to be absolutely the perfect goal. This is a mistake that people make. They get hung up. They say, well, I'm not sure if it's exactly perfect. Yeah, of course, you're never going to have the perfect goal. When have you ever had the perfect goal? You think, like, has anybody here ever been married exactly to the perfect person in exactly the right way? Has anybody here ever had exactly the right house in exactly the right way? Has anybody had exactly the right career? I mean, it doesn't happen. Exactly the right vacation, whatever it is, it's not going to happen. You're never going to have exactly the right goal because the goal was not the point. The goal was the vehicle. You just need the goal to be good enough. And this is again, this is like gold because people get hung up on the goals. They think, they're like, oh, I don't know if it's good enough. I don't know if I should go for something even better. Like, my marriage is pretty good, but I think it could be better. Maybe I should get divorced and get married to somebody else. Like, oh my goodness, really? You want to do that? Um, so don't expect for the vehicle to be absolutely perfect, whatever that would mean. Just understand that the goal is the vehicle. You want it to be good enough. And then you want to know what the values are that you're wanting to fulfill through that goal. So when you have those two things, then plus the understanding of everything else that I've said, you can achieve miracles over and over and over and over and over. So then when you know all of that, then the next important piece, and this is the only other thing that I'm going to say today, is that so that gives you something, the goal and the values give you both a direction and some rules. Okay, so the goal gives you the direction, tells you where you're going. The values give you the rule set, right? So I want $1 million, that's my goal. And the rule set is that it must be in alignment with happiness and freedom and peace, something like that. I have no idea what your values might be or if you even want $1 million, but let's just say that's an example, okay? So I now know where I'm going. I'm going to $1 million. That's my destination. That's my target. And my values of whatever I said, I don't remember, happiness, freedom, and peace, are the rules that I'm using to get there. So if there are infinite routes to get there, and if there's a route that's not in alignment with those values, I'm not going to take it because that will not be good. It will not give me what I really want. So I'm going to only take those routes that are in alignment with those values. When I know that, then I can achieve success as long as, and this is the thing, as long as I don't get blocked. So along the way, I'm using a metaphor now of a journey where I have a destination and I have some rules where I say these are the rules that I'm using to determine what routes I'm going to select to get there. I still have many different routes I could select, but I can only take one at a time. So I'm taking some route. Now, as I'm taking that route, I'm likely to encounter some kind of obstacle. If I don't encounter any obstacle, will I get to my destination? Yes. Think about it. If you want to get to some destination, you want to go to some some lake somewhere to go swimming, and you say, "Boy, I really want to go swimming. It's going to be so delightful. Swimming is amazing. It's such a perfect day. I'm going to go swimming. It's going to be beautiful. Love swimming in that lake. That lake is the best lake to go swimming in. You're really wanting to go swimming in that lake. So uh, if there's no obstacle for you, if you know exactly how to get there, and there's nothing that interferes with you getting there, will you get there? The answer to that is yes. But if there are obstacles, guess what? Now you've got obstacles, right? So if you're like, well, the lake is 10 miles away. It's kind of a long distance for me to walk there. So I think I'm going to drive. And then you're like, oh, but the car is out of gas. Uh-oh, obstacle, right? So there's an obstacle. Now, does that mean that you're not going to be able to get there? No, it just means there's an obstacle. But now that you have that obstacle, because you're thinking, well, this is my path. I'm going to drive the car, and that's how I'm going to get there. And you're like, oh, the car's out of gas. And somebody you're going to say, well, it's an electric car, so I don't have that problem. Ha 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 ha. Whatever. Your car's out of fuel. Whatever. However your car goes, it doesn't have that fuel. So it's an obstacle. Now, what are you going to do? Well, you have to resolve the obstacle. So if you don't bring some consciousness to that, then you'll just stay stuck. You'll say, oh, I guess I can't go. Car's not going, I'm not going. So if you want to achieve that, then you need to resolve that obstacle. So how are you going to do that? I don't know, right? You could find out how to refuel. Maybe that would be the solution. Maybe not. In which case, maybe you have to figure something else out, right? Like maybe like, oh, well, I guess I could bike. I could bike. I've got a bike. It's not that far. It's a nice ride. I'll just take a bike. But and then you get the bike out of the garage and the bike's got a flat tire. You're like, oh, another obstacle. So you're going to encounter, it's likely that you will encounter obstacles along the way. Now, in terms of most things in our lives, what do those obstacles look like? Most of those obstacles look like limiting beliefs. So I say, I want $1 million, and I'm going to have $1 million in alignment with my values of happiness, peace, and whatever else I said, freedom. Okay, so that's what I'm going to achieve. That's my goal. Those are my values. That's how I'm going to get there. Great. And then when I'm contemplating that, a belief comes up and says, well, I'm not good enough for that. Okay, so if I have the belief I'm not good enough for that, am I likely or unlikely to take the necessary steps in order to achieve what I want? Unlikely. So I need to release that limiting belief so that I'm not held back by that obstacle. So in order to achieve any goal that you have, there are likely to be obstacles in the form of limiting beliefs. Now, there can be other obstacles. It's not just limiting beliefs, although in some sense they could all be translated through the lens of limiting beliefs. But in some cases, it's more direct to address them in other ways. But for our purposes today, we'll just talk about them in terms of limiting beliefs. So you have limiting beliefs that are going to come up, whatever it is. It's like, I can't, it's too hard, I'm not good enough. People like me can't succeed. It's impossible because of the economy. This other person will make it impossible. Whatever the reasons are, you got so many of these limiting beliefs that interfere. And as if you don't address them and resolve them and release them, then you're going to be held back. You're like in the metaphor, in the example of I want to go to the lake, but the car's out of fuel. If I'm just like, well, car's out of fuel, I guess I can't go. I will not go. It's only when I resolve that, when I realize, that there are solutions to this. It's not an obstacle. Then I can move forward. And so this is the way with any of the limiting beliefs. So with limiting beliefs, now people are going to say, well, how do I release limiting beliefs? Well, again, I have, so in the Manifesting Truth program, I teach people extensively on how to do this. I have another program that's specifically focused on this that if you're signed up to my newsletter, we'll be announcing that soon. So it's a process that, in my experience, most people require some repeated exposure to the knowledge in order to really be able to understand it and master it. Not because it's difficult, because it's not, but just because it usually requires some repeated exposure and practice in order to really understand it and master it. So it would be a disservice to you if I was trying to tell you, well, here's the 2 steps and then it's good luck and you can succeed. I mean, you could, but I just want to be clear that if you really are serious about that and you really want to master that, then it's well worth your while to invest some time in really gaining that knowledge and having some guidance with how to use it. So what I will tell you today that will give you enough information that you can start to tease this out on your own is this. So think about what a belief is. So if you have a belief like, I'm not good enough, it's one of the most common beliefs. So if you have a belief that says, I'm not good enough, how do you know that? And I'll tell you the answer to that. It's because you have a meaning. Okay, so the meaning is represented by those words, I'm not good enough. And then you have some evidence that you use to support that meaning. Because the meaning by itself is just sounds. It's just vibration. It doesn't mean anything really. It's just like, if it's not attached to something, it has no real energy or power to it. So it's just meh, 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 meh. But it starts to actually seem like something when it gets associated with some experiences that you've had. Okay, so you have this sound that says, I'm not good enough. And then you have associated that with certain experiences. And in particular, it turns out that it's mostly things that you've seen, heard, and felt. And so you can just think about, what are the things that you've seen, heard, and felt that to you mean I'm not good enough, or whatever the belief is. And then just ask yourself, how do you know that those things really mean that? Right? So you've seen things, you've heard things, and you've felt things, and you assumed that they meant I'm not good enough or whatever it was, whatever the belief is. So, when I was 2 years old, daddy told me, you're not good enough. And I took that to mean I'm not good enough. I mean, it seems on the surface seems logical enough. Daddy told me I'm not good enough. It must mean I'm not good enough. But does it really mean that? Does it really mean I'm not good enough? Daddy said I'm not good enough. Does that really mean I'm not good enough? Actually, no, it doesn't. All it means, the only thing it means is that daddy said those sounds. All it means. Maybe, when I was 5 years old, I worked on this drawing and I brought it into school, and the teacher's like, "Oh, that's so nice, Johnny. Here, let's just move along." And I took that to mean, oh, the teacher didn't think it was good enough, therefore I'm not good enough. That's what I thought it meant. But does it really mean that? No. It's just I just saw something. That's it. That doesn't mean anything. And then the feelings, it's like, well, so I have a feeling, I get a sinking feeling, I get a crushing feeling, I get a hot feeling, a sweaty feeling, a cold feeling, chilly feeling, nauseous feeling. I get all these feelings, and I think that means I'm not good enough. Does it really mean I'm not good enough? No, it's just a feeling. Feelings are just sensations. That's it. So with that information, you can start to tease that apart for yourself. Like I said, if you really wanted to learn that in more detail as I teach it, I have those opportunities available. But with that information, that's the underpinnings. You can start to just explore that and just tease those things apart for yourself. You can just investigate with any belief that you have and just find out, what did I see? What did I hear? What did I feel that I thought meant whatever the belief is? And then just find out, did any of that actually mean what I thought it meant? When you can really truly see that none of it ever meant anything, it was just whatever it was. It was just some things you saw, some things you heard, and some things that you felt. Then you no longer have the belief. Uh, in practice, sometimes it does happen that there's one little hitch, which is sometimes we still have some resistance to letting go of the belief, even once we can see that there's no real truth to it. That it's the associations are released. Still, sometimes there's still this clinging to the belief because it seems to serve some other purpose. And for that, also I have a process that I teach that resolves that quite simply, but that also takes some repeated exposure and practice in order to really master it. So I'm not going to try to give you that here because I think that would be a disservice. But I will just tell you that you can just keep in mind. So for those of you who attended the presentation that I gave about the one thing that uh, was about inner conflict. So the takeaway from that, which I'll just tell you now, is just know that all parts of yourself have positive intention. So there's if you consciously don't want to keep a belief, like who consciously wants to keep a belief, I'm not good enough. I mean, that's consciously you wouldn't want to keep that belief. But if there's some part of you that's holding on to that belief, then you can just address it in that way and understand that there's an inner conflict because consciously you don't want the belief, but unconsciously there's a part of you that is holding on to that belief. And it's doing so because it has a positive intention. So when you talk to that part of yourself, find out what its positive intention is, then you can that can be helpful in terms of releasing it. Again, I have specific processes that I teach people for doing that I'm not going to try and get into here. But with just that information, you can begin to. I've really just given you everything you need, honest to goodness. So with just some time and commitment and dedication, you can succeed in everything in your life with that information. So I gave you an enormous amount of information today. Completely violated my own usual rules for things. I try to just keep it focused on just one thing. But what I realized is, like I said, people are just asking the same questions over and over and over, and I just wanted to make sure that the information's here all in one thing so that it's all presented comprehensively so that anybody can refer to this. And as long as you have you're persistent, consistent, dedicated, committed, you can succeed with this. It might take you some time because it takes time on your own to try and figure this out. So that's all I had to say for today. Just to wrap it up before we move on to the group coaching for those who are here live, I'll also just say that for anybody who has not yet joined the Manifesting Truth program, I really encourage you to consider that, because in that program, I provide all of this information in bite-sized pieces, so it's not all just thrown at you all at once, but we do it one piece at a time over 9 weeks to ensure that you can have success with it, because it's all practical application week after week. So you just take one small piece. I give you the exact practices so that you can apply that in a very simple way that's easy to integrate into your life. And then the next week, you build upon that with the next small step. And that way it becomes integrated into your life so that by the end of 9 weeks, it's just happening automatically and naturally for you, that you've really understood and integrated all of this and you're putting it into practice without even thinking about it in a lot of ways. That's the power of that. Plus, you get my support every day as you're in that process. So if you have questions, I can address those questions that way. I've also realized, I'll just say this. In order to be able to be of the greatest service to people, I've realized that I need to have a different system for and policies for how I respond to questions. So I am changing and formulating my new policies for how I respond to questions publicly. I have had a policy of responding to questions in comments on YouTube and through email, and I've realized that that's actually unsustainable and detracts from what it is that I can really, the real value that I can provide. So I'm going to be reformulating that. I will have something in place soon so that I will still be responding to things, but it will just be through a particular mechanism so that can be more streamlined. So for now, just for anybody who's watching this on YouTube or anybody who otherwise would want to ask me a question in an email or in a comment on YouTube, I'm not going to be responding to those for now. The best way to be able to get my support, if you have questions, is either by attending these meetings live, because then I offer group coaching that's free. So anybody who has questions, you can join these meetings live, and you can do that by signing up for my newsletter at joeylott.com. You'll get that information, and you can join these meetings live. You can attend the group coaching sessions. So then if you have questions, I can answer those directly there. Or you can join one of the programs that I offer that are paid programs where I offer direct support to the members of those programs. So those are the very best ways to ask your questions and get them answered until I have some other system set up, which I'm working on, and I will announce that when it's available. And if you want to get those announcements, the best way is, again, to sign up for my newsletter on my website at joeylott.com. I'll provide links to my website, to the newsletter, and to the Manifesting Truth program in the description on YouTube. And that's all I'm going to say. So just to wrap that up, for people watching this on YouTube, blessings to you. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye for now.